Let's get it. This is Life's Essential Ingredients with Jeff and a Mike, where we hope to inform, inspire, and transform lives, one essential ingredient at a time. Welcome to the show. Yes, good afternoon, good morning, and everything else to everybody out there listening to another episode of Life's Essential Ingredients. My Pasho is busy working today, so it's just me and the guest, Sean Clifford. Sean's coming from Austin, Texas, and so I think it's still morning out there for you, Sean. So good morning to you, first of all. You looking good?
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Sean and I were talking before the show here, and just so much with his subject matter expertise and his passion. So it's going to be an amazing show. A lot of good resources going to be shared, and a subject matter that might open up your eyes a little bit. And definitely, if you're a parent, you're gonna want to listen into this whole episode because it's going to be some good information and conversations that are usually a little difficult to have even amongst friends, but for sure with your children. And so, it's going to be an awesome show. So a little bit about Sean Clifford. Again, in the first place where you can find Sean is through his business, and it's Canopy, CANOPY.US. It's an amazing site, an amazing business, and what Sean does, first of all, he's the founder and CEO of Canopy. His staff is composed of strategists, researchers, technologists, designers, and above all, parents. Canopy is a group of like-minded people who want something better for families. And I'm going to just say that again because that one gets me hyped up. Canopy is a group of like-minded people who want something better for families. Canopy has decades of experience in tech, media, and policy in pursuit of a shared mission to pioneer new solutions to a safer, family-oriented internet. And that's already a hot button for me because I think we have so much work to do in that space. Canopy's work is guided and shaped by leading thinkers, scientists, and academics. Canopy is committed to building technology that supports parents and having the tools they need to create the right internet experience for their families. And I love that word, having the tools. They need to create the right internet experience. Sean received his Bachelor of Arts degree in political economy from Williams College, his Master's in Arts and Liberal Arts from St. John's College, and his MBA from UPENN, the Wharton School, in 2016. Sean is the father of 4 children and is passionate about making the world safer for children and families. Sean, welcome to the show.
So glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
No, it's gonna be awesome. And we usually start our show with a thought of the day. And I was telling Sean before, I was researching, and I'm 100% with these thoughts of the day. And usually they're a little bit more personal, but I couldn't find a whole bunch on Sean other than all that he's putting into his life's work, which is a whole bunch. So he probably doesn't have time for anything else other than his family and trying to protect all the families out in the world. And so this thought, I think, goes exactly with what I just said. So here we go, Sean. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And that's from the great Martin Luther King. What are your thoughts, and why would I pick that for what you're doing?
Wow, so much to unpack there. What a great quote. Image that jumps to mind is a spider web, but that almost has negative connotations where I don't think this one is. Look, I think we live in a world in which our actions, our inputs, we sometimes think are isolated to what we're just doing, but man, they have a much broader impact beyond that. Not only in terms of like how they shape us, that then informs how we interact with others, but when you put something out there, it has the potential to ripple out. And we can talk about that, whether it's a viral post or it's social media that just connects within your own network, or the very ways that we're using our devices. So again, I'm kind of going towards how we're using tech today, top of my mind, but it really plays a role in shaping ourselves, our families, our communities, and then society much more broadly. So that's on point. I want to write that one down.
Yeah. And I want to get this out. I listened to you on another podcast, and I think you and I share this viewpoint because I think I can get misinterpreted, and I want to just get this right out of the gate. You're a huge fan of tech, and I am as well. And I, again, sometimes get people a little bit riled up and ruffled because I see the changes that are not good from the influence of it because we haven't used it as a tool. And that's why I love that in your mission statement of having the tools and supporting the parents. And so I'll just let you speak so people don't quickly tune out of this episode because it's nothing against technology. You and I both aren't ignorant in that way that we got to support it, but we got to figure out how we use it and not let it use us. So I'll just let you speak to technology and the influence of it.
Gosh, so much there. Yes, technology is amazing. It has delivered us unparalleled opportunities to interact with the people that we care about. I think everyone has appreciated that over the past year, in particular with the pandemic and the lockdowns and the inability to travel and see people that we care about. It has become the primary vehicle for so many of our kids to interact and socialize with their friends, to learn, to entertain themselves through, adventuring online. And so much of that is amazing and truly amazing. And we should celebrate that and support that. And one of the reasons why we love our devices is that they do serve us up some really incredible opportunities. And at the same time, right now, there's not a lot of guardrails in place. And I kind of think of, technology, there's a lot there that it's like sugar and it's really enticing in the moment, but you get too much and it's going to leave you with that stomach ache. And so it's not appropriate. And so we've got to figure out how to use it well. And I think that's one of the great questions of the age. Can we learn to live well with technology? Can we harness it in a way where it's fulfilling our intentions and not just harvesting our attention, which is so much of what it tries to do right now? And it's hard. We're still in the early stages. I mean, we sometimes talk at Canopy about how we're engaged in this great social experiment. 12 years ago, it was 13 years ago when the iPhone was invented. It's still pretty new. And we've gone from invention of a new device to effectively 90+% penetration among teenagers in this country in the snap of fingers in just a moment. And trying to figure that out, it's hard. Technology is not going away, so we've got to figure it out. And I'm hopeful at what we.
Yeah, no, you said a whole bunch right there, and we're going to get in to a lot of that throughout this episode, but I want to change it up right out of the gate because I don't want to get too serious because I think this is going to be a serious, very educational episode. So first thing, and this is a little bit of a serious question as I say that, but it's more about you as a father and a person. It's called the Triple H. So right out of the gate, hey, who's been a hero in your life? Describe a hardship, whichever way you want to share that, and then just a highlight of your life, just to let people know who is Sean Clifford.
Well, you got it. You actually have foreshadowed a little bit my essential ingredient, which I'll get to in a little bit. But I'll tell you about two heroes. Two heroes are my grandfathers. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was very lucky that both of them lived within a mile. One lived with us, the other lived about a mile away. And so they were an incredibly formative part of my life growing up. One was born in Poland, moved to France, joined the French Foreign Legion, fought there in World War II, narrowly escaped, went to Casablanca, and entered to the United States through Ellis Island, and just has one of these amazing stories. The other grew up in Ohio. His father died during the Depression. He was the oldest boy in the house and started working before he was a teenager to support the family. And so worked through that, joined the Army, served in World War II in the Pacific. And the two of them just have these incredible stories. They are my heroes. They have played such an impactful role in my life in so many ways. I hear the stories of their hardship. I know your question was more about mine, but
Oh no.
it is difficult to listen to what my grandfather went through in Europe during World War II, or what my other grandfather went through in the Pacific, or the Depression, or coming back to the States and trying to figure things out, and not have some sense of perspective. And these were stories that were told over and over again at the dinner table on a weekly basis. It wasn't just kind of a one-off. It was like woven into the fabric of my childhood in a way that I love. And I'll go ahead and say it now. I think one of the essential ingredients I love to talk about is like, you have to have exemplars. You've got to have heroes that you keep in the forefront of your mind. And they were that for me. And the highlight was they have been storytellers that can, whether it's something grand, something unique, like being in the French Foreign Legion, or something even mundane, a small aspect of life, but to weave a story around it in a way that captures your attention and excites the imagination. For me, I walked away with an appreciation for stories matter, your imagination matters, and you need to take care to cultivate those things well. So a highlight for me is I felt so lucky that I had those stories that kind of shaped me as I was, a young man growing up, kind of then venturing off into the world. And they stick with me to this day. I've got 4 kids of my own, and I'm very conscious now about the stories that I want to pass on to them.
Let's just go right there, man. I love that. And again, there's a lot of similarity in what you're saying and some of the passions that we have. I love running across people that have the ability to tell a story, and especially when it's attached to history like yours, and then to have it be someone, 2 people in your family, and to get that again and again and again, that is powerful. And then I love you saying that imagination matters. And I don't want to, but I'm going to put a little circle here. I'm taking notes as you're talking, but I want to come back to that because I wanted to get into your 4 kids. And obviously everybody's been going through this with the pandemic, but what's been something you've gained or appreciated in just having more time with your kids through this thing?
Gosh, it's been a gift. So I was working from home for a while, especially last year, and being able to take a 5-minute coffee break and go sit down and read a story with my then 4-year-old, or have lunch with my wife and kids during the day. Those touch points just meant so much to me, I think to our kids as well. And it was just a gift. It was just, gosh, it was the best. I loved it. We're back in the office now, regrettably. And not all bad, but I sure miss those little touch points throughout the day, because it's such a special season of life, and I just want to hold on to as much of it as I can.
Yeah, definitely. I have 2 kids, and the pandemic has been awesome from that standpoint for me, because they were already, one of them was supposed to be away in college, and she unfortunately had to come home, or fortunately for us. And so we got an extra year with her that way. And then my oldest daughter is a nurse, and she got affected. She was living with a family friend. The pandemic hit. They didn't want her taking care of COVID, which I totally understand. And so she was doing Airbnbs and commuting 4 hours. I'm going to just get a job closer to home. And so, she's been living with us the last year through this thing. And then now just found out for her last night. And then my youngest daughter this morning, they're both moving out. And one of them's going to Spain, Aaliyah, my youngest, to teach English. And then Capriana, my oldest, is going to be starting a new job up in Sacramento. And the traffic, like Austin, is getting crazy out here. So it's like, you go get an apartment and do your thing and start living your life. So, I know for me in 6 months when they're gone, I'm just going to reflect like you of these touch points of just being able to just run out and see them and hug them. And you just learn to appreciate each and every moment that you have. And that's one thing where we'll agree, and I'll jump into this imagination matters I think that technology can definitely inspire that, but I also think on the flip side, if you don't use it as a tool to help you, find this space that's going to allow us to use this imagination, there could be so much going on that you really never get into that space, and you just have so many different thoughts. And I'm sure you're aware our attention span now is about 7 seconds. And so in order to get into that space of having an imagination, you kind of got to slow life down a little bit and just take time to just think. And that's one thing that I know will come up throughout this, because that's for sure an essential ingredient for me, I'll just say, of just having some time to just sit and be with nothing else going on. And that's how you tap into your imagination and figure out, what thoughts and what you want to do to get creative and hopefully come up with something to share with the world, or in this case, share with your family. So yeah, let's get in to this, because there's going to be a lot that we got to talk about, and definitely let me just let you talk about your company and why you started it, and educate the listeners on Canopy and the amazing work that you're doing.
Great. So Canopy is a digital parenting app. Our first project is software that you would download to your child's device, and we effectively deliver you a porn-free internet experience. We've got some amazing tech advances that were developed by our innovation team in Israel that effectively can scan internet traffic in real time and identify any nudity or pornography with 99.7% accuracy, and then just pull it out or block the whole page if too much of the page is problematic. So we think this is a cutting edge and totally different approach to traditional internet filters, because we're not relying on some list of bad things that was maybe up to date yesterday. It's all happening in real time as you browse in milliseconds. So that's effectively what we do. We also have the capability to prevent and deter sexting, which we can talk about later if of interest. And that's the kind of the first foray. We have much grander visions for where we'd like to take this thing. The why is this: we think, as we said at the very beginning of the show, that technology is amazing and technology is not going away. We have to figure out how to live well with it. And that's hard because we're still in the very early innings of having immediate access to everything at our fingertips at a moment's notice. And that's challenging for adults. It's especially problematic for kids. And so why did we get this off? Number one, I've got 4 kids, and I've seen how technology shapes us. As I'm sure we've all been at restaurants where you see families sitting down and they're all on their devices. We've all seen images of, people in, whether it's they're driving a car on their device or walking and debunking and stuff, right? It's captivating. These things are very compelling and alluring. And some of that's not bad, but man, we've got to figure out how to put them in their proper place. There's a time for it. There's a way it can be amazing. And there's also ways in which it can lead us astray. And as I was thinking about raising my own 4 kids, I wanted to make sure that we could not only equip them, but other families as well, with a tool that helps you parent and set up those guardrails, set up some of those safeguards so that your kids can explore and they can benefit from all the good, just without the bad that right now regrettably is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and one thing, listening to your other podcast, or maybe this is some of the research and why it's so important what you do, 60% of kids' exposure to porn is accidental, and then I think when you just start, and we'll get into defining porn and all that, but just in talking about it, I just couldn't imagine, my daughters being 4 or 5 and being on some sort of device and running across something like that and just not having any clue. And then unfortunately, just human nature, I'm guessing that children would run across that, and it's not like they're going to run to their parents and say, hey, I saw this, because they know that was something that they shouldn't have seen. And so there's just so what you guys are offering and doing is just vital to the health and well-being of all people. And we're going to get into what that means. So I just want to thank you for investing your life in the protection of children, and for providing a platform for parents to come to as a great resource from another parent who is doing this for the genuine love of allowing children to thrive and do what they do. So let's get in. Let me throw out, I'm going through a few notes here, and let me just jump into this one that's crazy that I wrote down yesterday. So this is just numbers of people that view the internet. Let's just start with that. And so Google per month has 19.5 billion people that are using that service. YouTube, 6.5, which is also Google. Facebook, 4 billion. Amazon, 2 billion. Yahoo, 1.5 billion. Netflix, which I thought would be higher, is 541 million. And again, this is per month. Zoom, with all this craziness with the pandemic, is up at 629 million. Now, this is what's crazy to me. And this is just in the U.S. So porn, this Xvideos site, gets 639.5 million views each month. And then another one, Pornhub, is 639.6. I mean, that's just crazy, those numbers. And that's just in the U.S. And I don't know exactly what we got now. It's like 328, maybe 329 million people that we have in our country. And then if you just think about that, just double that. And that's every last person in our country that's going to this site twice a month. That's just two of the sites that were listed. What are your thoughts on just those numbers right there?
I think those numbers really make the case that this is the sea that we're swimming in. We're just immersed in it. It's so fluid. It's wrapped around us at all times. It's such a big part of our day-to-day life. And this is why I think it's not going away, right? So we're not going to be able to put the cat back in the bag. And this is why I think we really have to figure out not how to overcome it per se, but how to actually live well within it. Because it's out there, right? It's just the normal part of our day-to-day life, and especially for teenagers. So Alex, back up for 1 second. There was this dichotomy that came about maybe 5-10 years ago about digital natives and digital immigrants, right? So kids that were growing up in the 90s, the millennials, were digital natives. They had never lived without having access to the internet. Their parents were the digital immigrants. It was new to them. They kind of came to this world and it wasn't intuitive, and they kind of had to figure out how to navigate. I'd love to introduce a third, which is the device native, which is the generation that has grown up with the device in their hand for many Americans, from age 5. So the average 8 to 11-year-old has their own tablet, like more than 50% in this country. And the device natives are growing up with this. And so the numbers you listed are for everyone. For kids in particular, the rates with which they access the internet, all these platforms, everything that you're talking about is even higher. So we got to even fast forward and think what the implications of that will be 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's crazy. So I'm just going to be sharing some stuff, and then you give me your insight on it. Okay. So online pornography is accessible from anywhere with an internet connection, and it's available 24/7. The internet allows global dissemination of porn via the AAA engine: accessibility, affordability, and anonymity. I can't even say that word. Concerns regarding child and adolescent use of porn around the three basic themes: easy access to porn, the content of the porn, and then the ability of a child or adolescent to separate pornography fiction from sexuality and sexual relationship. Okay, and this is just from a study. So these problem sexualized behaviors of children less than 12, early initiation of sexual activity. So this is, again, from the influence of them running across this porn that has this AAA engine: accessible, affordable, and anonymous. I'm going to change up the word so I can say it. High risk sexual behaviors, sexual aggression, gender role distortion, objectification of women, unrealistic expectations of sexual relationships, the brain changes, which I know you'll speak about, develop internet disorder, which is addiction, and then develop internet pornography disorder. And these are some diagnoses that are looking at. And then I just want to share one last thing, then I'll let you speak to it, since we're talking about adolescence. And again, researching this, there was a study in Croatia, and this is what's unfortunate. Mike, who is usually on the show with me, is Croatian. So he would have had this, and this was just random, but there was 1,000 Croatian adolescents that participated in a 3-wave study and were surveyed regarding their use of pornography and their sexual activity 3 times at 1-year intervals. So participants were 16 years of age at baseline, and the proportion of the sexual active participants increased from 23% at baseline to 38.1% at wave 3 among males. And from a baseline of 19.7% to 38.1% at wave 3 for adolescent females. And then adolescent males who reported moderate to high pornography use and female adolescents who reported regular pornography use demonstrated a higher rate of sexual initiation. So I know I just threw a whole bunch, but looking at the impact, again, of the ubiquitous effect of this, and just the 24/7, how it's just always around. But I know I threw a bunch of stuff, but pick and choose what spoke to you and what you'd like to share, the importance of the work that you're doing.
Gosh, the first thing I'll say is the stats on this and the ones you mentioned they're eye-opening. I find them, they're hard to bear just because it's impacting us in so many different ways. But I'll say 3 quick things. Number 1, on the research, thanks especially to some advances in neuroscience, we now have so much more information about how pornography actually changes the brain. And we also know how it changes the body. And we've got the social science that indicates how it's impacting us at a societal level. The science, the data, the research is moving in one direction about how this is impacting us, and it's not a good direction. And there's now mountains of it available. The second thing I'll say is, and this is really for the parents out there, we need to understand that there's a difference between old pornography, which I think is what most people above the age of 35 think of when they think of pornography, which is effectively Playboy. If you think that Playboy is pornography, you're not in touch with what it is today. Today, pornography is Pornhub, and the differences between the two could not be more stark. Playboy is tame by comparison. Pornhub is instantaneously accessible and offers unending novelty, infinite number of HD videos that often move in a dark direction. And the combination of those things make it so much more bingeable and addictive than what we encountered before. I'm not saying that you didn't find people that were addicted to Playboy, but we're in a completely different zone now with respect to how this is impacting us. And so that's the third thing I want to talk about, which is this impacts us as individuals and it impacts us at the societal level. And I think the stats that you spoke to, this shapes not only how your brain is wired, and there's a lot of data about that, it shapes how you think of other people. It shapes what you think constitutes normal intimacy and what you think is healthy in a relationship. And then as you start to build up upon that, it actually starts to shape your expectations for what you want and expect from the world. in ways that I think might be problematic. I mean, the one stat that I heard, I'll share two quick anecdotes on that. One is from a guy named Gary Wilson, who wrote a book called Your Brain on Porn. And he talks about one Canadian researcher that was trying to do a study to understand the differences in the impact of online pornography on college-age boys. And he couldn't do the study because he couldn't find a control group that hadn't been exposed to pornography. Just couldn't find a large enough group of men who had not been exposed at one point. And so that's kind of an indication of how prevalent it is. The second anecdote that I would just briefly share is this is that's actually a stat, and it's a dark one, and I don't want to do fear mongering, but sometimes we need to be aware of the challenges of the world as they're out there. And this one is that the percentage of men who are under the age of 30 who had erectile dysfunction back in 2010 was 1%. This was not something that young men under the age of 30 encountered. The percentage of men under the age of 30 who have it today in 2020 is somewhere around 25%. This is tied to their, we can debate the causality around this, but the researchers believe that this is tied to the exposure to online pornography. So it is shaping us in powerful ways that if we really care about bigger things, if you want your kids to have healthy relationships and to fall in love and to get married, we've got to be attentive to. We've got to figure out how to navigate these very tricky waters.
Mm-hmm. Man, you said a whole bunch. I'm just writing one more thing. And I'll just jump to it right out of the gate. Fall in love and hopefully have a fulfilling and happy marriage. Yeah. I mean, just as a father, I tell my kids all the time, we just want you to be happy, whatever that definition is for them. And hopefully we've done a good job role modeling as a husband and wife to our kids of what that would look like. And if we haven't, hopefully they can take, their own definition and come up with that. But at the end of the day, I think every last parent that's on this earth would want their child to have a happy and fulfilled life. And obviously, pornography is going to significantly impact that if you just keep it at its simplest form, and so, yeah, we just need to do a better job of having more talks like this, of getting the word out more. Those numbers I haven't heard, but that's crazy to me, the erectile dysfunction of 1% just 11 years ago and up to 25% now. Other numbers, when you were talking and in me get prepared, in 2017, there was a study out of University of Texas that 43% of men access porn within the last week. That was in the U.S. So basically half of us, and it's just become something that is we've let to become normal, to be, hey, this is just what you do, and so, yeah, that's a big part of the challenge. What insight would you have on just speaking, and do you even agree? I'm sure you do, but what insight? How do we create a new normal?
Gosh, that's the question. The first thing I think we need to acknowledge is that this has been normalized. So we have to understand the landscape that we're operating in and probe even further to understand why it's been normalized. And I think we have to recognize that first, we live in a hypersexualized culture. Second, that there are certain biological drives that were hardwired here, and that we need to be cognizant of them, and that then can inform where we go. When we are out there talking to folks that would describe themselves as addicts or having a problem with pornography, the language that they use is one of other addictions. It's, I'm trapped, I'm in a cage, I want freedom, I don't want this, I know it's not good for me, but I can't overcome it. And understanding how this actually impacts us, I think is critical to give people the resources and the tools they need to go forward. So what do we actually say? First, we need folks to understand that this is different than what it was 30 years ago. Second, we need to give people the space to step away from this in order to have the conversations and figure out what's really going to lead them towards that happiness and fulfillment and health that I think we all want. We think Canopy can provide that space. It can give you, right, if you want to quit smoking, don't walk around with a pack in your pocket. And pornography is tempting. And so you need to have some tool in place to ensure that you're not going to just trip down it, even when you're trying to avoid it. The third thing, though, which I think is really hard, is you got to change hearts and minds, right? That's the most important work. You have to raise a generation that wants something higher and wants something better and understands the allure and the temptation, but decides that they're not going to succumb to it. And sometimes you need the tool in place to give them the space for that to happen and to serve as that vehicle to let them come above it. But ultimately, this has to come about from people wanting something better. And on that point, I think that's the hardest thing. It's actually one of the areas where I think we have the most signs of hope. And this may sound strange, but the sign of hope, it comes from the depth of the problem. And that's, we are hearing more and more. And look, I always want to be careful because I recognize the line of business that I'm in and that people come to me with this, but people recognize this is not making them happy. Whether it's pornography specifically or addiction to their phones more broadly, or the way that social media can kind of channel them in directions they know they don't want to go in, they recognize that this is not delivering them the things they want. And it's been documented in great books like iGen by Dr. Jean Twenge. You had the Netflix movie, The Social Dilemma. It is out there. More and more people realize that we've got to find a better way forward. So that's coming from the depth and the prevalence of the problem, but it's the thing that will ultimately encourage people to find a better way forward.
Man, yeah, you said a whole bunch, and I'm going to jump just on the medical side. I don't know if you're aware, but I'm a nurse, is what I've done for 29 years, and so part of looking at this, I think and I have an amazing doctor. And I hope she's not listening in on this. I doubt it. But I know she's never talked to me about my sex life, And so I think it's, that's the one big challenge. I think just healthcare can do a better job of having people creating, and I love how you keep, using creating the space. I use that a lot myself, but I think we can do a better job of just providing that space for patients, for clients to have these conversations around their sex life. And then hopefully that opens up and creates a space for someone who might be having this challenge of this addiction. Because if you're not going to talk about, the sex life, this is going to be a more challenging subject matter to talk to your doctor about if you're not taking the first step. So, yeah, any, healthcare practitioners out there, I think we could do a better job of that. And then starting early, with the children. One other thing to contradict everything that you're saying, that I've been saying, again, you and I are on the same page, and you can always find numbers out there everywhere. This was a Norwegian study. So, and I know not to sound however it sounds, but sometimes over in Europe, they look at having sex a little different. But this was a big N, 4,160 adults out of Norwegian adults. Most participants, 41.3, did not believe that pornography affected their sex life. And obviously it's a study, but just what would you say to that?
I would say two things. First, The Atlantic came out with a study recently and they found something similar. But when you're looking at adults, I think you really have to divide between those that came up with immediate access to high-speed internet and those who didn't. Because if your understanding of pornography was Playboy, or maybe a video that was hard to come by at a video store, it just is not the same thing. So it's a complete apples to oranges comparison. So that's the first thing. I'd want to go dive deep into the people that were 30 years of age and younger and see how it was impacting them. The second thing I'd want to explore is, what are the impacts that they're actually attuned to? Because, Fight the New Drug is a great organization. They talk about brain, heart, and world. And this issue impacts us in a variety of ways. One is our own brain, our own physiology. One is in our relationships. And the second is like what the consumption of pornography does more broadly, both in terms of contributing to the hypersexualization of our culture and the signals that sends, but also the people that are just trafficked through this movement. And it's horrifying how much of that space actually is like, it's not voluntary. And so when you want to look at the impact of what pornography is doing, let's go through those three different phases and really understand. And just looking at if someone who has consumed it, and I'm sorry, just the last thing I'll say is asking an addict or someone who's been doing something for a long time, if they think that it's good or bad when they're addicted to it, I'm not sure is the right necessary way to kind of evaluate the end impact of it. But
yeah, not a lot of easy solutions to this thing, and the numbers are tricky. But let's go along what you were saying. I don't know what you'll be able to say to this, but it's just something that I cut and pasted from, again, just another research article, and it's just not any numbers. It's just a statement. The main worry now is social and cultural, and it encompasses the well-being of people who do not themselves engage in pornography. And it kind of ties into that thought of the day almost, and just thinking about that. But what do you think about that statement? And I'll read it one more time. The main worry now is social and cultural, and it encompasses the well-being of people who do not themselves engage in pornography.
Yeah, this one's, I think we need to recognize that because pornography is so prevalent, it is shaping our culture more broadly, even for those that don't partake in it. And I'll give you one small example. 2/3 of American high school girls have been asked to send a nude photo of themselves, a sext, to one of their classmates. Where does that come from? Right? That's primarily driven, as best we can tell, from people that have grown up with a certain understanding of sex, its role, what kind of images are normal, and that's an acceptable thing to request of someone else. And so in that instance, look, the men historically have watched pornography at higher rates than women. It now looks like it's changing. But for those young girls, let's say that most of them haven't been, they're now being impacted by these requests, which oftentimes are coming from people that think that behavior is acceptable because they've been normalized by pornography. So I think that's just one example where even if you are not partaking in it directly, it is shaping expectations. The stories and the anecdotes that I could tell, but would prefer not to, about how people who have watched pornography and then bring that into their own relationships with expectations of what's normal, what's acceptable, more often than not involving violence or things that I don't think we would be comfortable with. It's growing in its prevalence. So it's frightening, right? I've got 4 kids, raising them. I've got 1 girl and 4 boys. I don't know which one I think will be more challenging with respect to this issue, but from any angle you look at it, it is frightening to think about how our kid, like how we can navigate this.
Yeah, for sure. And this is where I'll just throw out some more numbers and then change the subject a little bit. And this is where it's interesting on the research end of looking at stuff, because all these numbers that I've been sharing were studies that were done recently, but since there aren't any new studies, and I'll explain this as I'm done with this statement here that we use these old numbers. And so we don't even have accurate stuff, but these are powerful in itself. So porn use has become widespread and mainstream in American society. Estimates that 60% of men, 35% of women have viewed porn at some time in the last year. And this was from Price in 2016. And then recent figures, and this is what's a little bit funny, estimate 40 million adults regularly view internet porn, an industry that generates 97 billion worldwide. Again, this is a recent study, but that reference is to a study from 2007. So, I mean, that's just when the iPhone was coming out, and that was 97 billion worldwide from that study. And then among young adult populations, porn is generally accepted and used. 67% of young men and 49% of young women rated porn consumption as acceptable. So that's a huge challenge that we have. While 87% of young men and 31% of young women reported using porn. Again, this back in a recent study, but that last statement that and this is all from the same paragraph, was referenced from a study in 2008. And so we just got to get updated numbers. And these figures suggest that there's an acceptance of porn. And so we just hopefully, or maybe we don't need to get updated numbers and just realize that, hey, if these were from 12, 13 years ago, and we were already assessing that this was a huge problem, let's just imagine how diverse and widespread it is now. And again, the need for some protection for our kids. And then I wasn't aware of your statement from before of 2/3 of high school girls have been asked to send an inappropriate picture of themselves. Yeah, and definitely as a father of 2 young women now, that shakes me up. And everybody knows once you put something out on the internet, it's out. And so, I know I just said a whole bunch. We've kind of been talking about that stuff. But any other kind of last thoughts on that?
I think the stats, which, do come from years past, there's no reason to believe that things have gotten better. Every indication that the breadth of exposure has only gotten worse since then. And it's out there, and it is forming us and shaping us in powerful ways, oftentimes contrary to what we want and hope for ourselves, but especially for our children. And that's kind of what's driving us at Canopy, which is to give people a fighting chance. Parents to make sure that they can push off as long as possible that first exposure, to give them the space to have conversations with their kids on their terms, right? Like, we cannot perfectly shield our children in this world, and I'm not sure that's realistic, or that's ultimately they'll be off into the world launched, which is what we actually want for them. So the question is, can we prepare them for that? But we've got to prepare them on our terms. And the question we often at Canopy will ask parents is, do you want your child to learn about these topics and these issues from a search engine, or from you, from someone that, an advertiser or a stranger, or for someone that cares about them and how they develop? And so this, all this, again, just for me, comes back to this. Parents, you've got to be engaged. This matters. What you say matters, even if you'll get the eye rolls, even if it's uncomfortable and awkward. And it is awkward. And, I've had that conversation the last month with 2 of my kids. Didn't want to do it. It's not, I wish this were not an issue. And my kids are still young, but it is. And I want them to be prepared, because I want bigger, grander things for them down the road. And I got to lay the foundation for that now.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And you just kind of spoke probably definitely at least one of the points, but I'm sure you'll have a couple more. As you know, this Life's Essential Ingredients is part of a nonprofit called C4 Leaders. C4 is an explosive, and it's powerful. And for us, we feel that power comes from these 4 C's: communication, chemistry, consistency, and creativity. And part of taking action within our nonprofit, we've created this process called Light the Fuse. And that's hey, it's go time. We got to get going right now to take action. And so from your standpoint, let's light the fuse. And you just said it, one of them, but I'm sure there's more. Having the conversations with your kids would be an action that parents could take. What other actions can you suggest to parents to light the fuse with getting a better handle on dealing with this serious challenge that we're having in this country?
Yeah. Number one, you've got to engage with your kids. It's not the talk. It's many talks over many years, and they're not comfortable. It is difficult. I empathize with every parent that's kind of cringing at thinking about how they'll even approach that, but you need to have those conversations, plural, over time as your kids grow. It's so important. All the data suggests that it matters, and it does shape how your kids conceive of these issues. The second thing is we think you need to protect your kids. And that means you have to have some kind of filter on your kids' devices, even if you trust your kids, because per that stat that you threw out at the very outset about 60% of first exposure being accidental. It used to be you had to go work hard to find pornography. Now you have to work hard to avoid it. So whether it's Canopy or something else, you need to have some protection in place to ensure that your kid's not being bombarded by this stuff. And regrettably right now they are. Then I think the third thing is you have to give them, paint a picture for the bigger, better things that you want for them. So when you're trying to displace this, instead of just the fear mongering, I know these conversations are hard, but paint for them like what you actually aspire for. As parents, you want nothing more than them having everything that they want and need to live a flourishing life. And by framing that as your goal from the outset, even if that means sometimes erecting guardrails or barriers or doing hard things in the interim, but reminding them that you ultimately want good things for them, I think that can help facilitate this. So we always, the third thing is we just frame for in your relationship with your kids that you want great things for them. And sometimes that means taking steps to get them there. The analogy that we'll use, and I'll conclude with this, is, teaching your kid how to drive. You don't hand the keys to an 8-year-old and say, good luck. You first make sure they sit in a car seat in the back, and then eventually they get out of the booster, and then they're in the front seat, and then they go to driver, right? And the goal is they turn 18 and they can experience that freedom and they can go out there, and that's exciting and alluring, and they want that. And we want them to have that, but it takes steps along the way. There has to be demonstration of responsibility, and you've got to do the work to get them to that point. And we think if you keep that in mind, right, and the end goal is freedom, right? The end goal is that autonomy, but it's autonomy with a bit of wisdom so that they can navigate this world well.
Great tips. And yeah, I love you just saying you want great things. Parents want great things for their children. And obviously, you and Canopy, again, you can find Sean at canopy.us, are doing some incredible things to help children live a healthy life. I don't want to get too morbid with you, but I want to get into this last, and I love asking the guests this question. And I start with this quote from John Alston, and it's the only thing you take with you when you're gone is what you leave behind. I want to fast forward, hopefully 50, 60, 70 years for you. And you're surrounded by the people that love you. You've lived an incredible life. What is it that you want to leave behind? What legacy do you want to leave with people in their heart and soul?
Gosh, so many ways to answer that, but I'll go back to where we began with the stories. I think the stories themselves tell so many, are the vehicles to pass on values, the things that we care about. Both of my grandfathers of blessed memory passed away in the last 15 years, but the stories that I have from them, some are about dealing with adversity, some are about the role of humor, some are about the importance of habit and ritual. Some are just stories that make me smile. but those stories that have been passed along are things that I tell to my kids. And so I'd love to have the stories that I can share with my kids that can be passed on to my grandkids, God willing, about what matters, about the heroes that have come before us, about what truly are the guideposts around which we should make our decisions. So I know it's kind of a catch-all, but man, it's the stories. I'd love to make sure that my kids have those stories on command, both the good and the bad, but the ones that really shape us.
God, I love that, and I have such a great picture of that. And then I just see you living your life, being in that space, and then so you start to look at, okay, Sean values creating and taking action with his family and in his life to put himself in a position to write his story and live his story. And he's going to do that by evaluating how he uses his time. And I guess that would be something that's just off the top of my head is like, man, how is, if you're a listener out there, and obviously there's no judgment on anything, but if you're wrapped up in this porn, is this allowing you to live the life that you want to share when your time is coming, and what value would be in that space of investing so much time, on the internet and in that space. And I think if you can just take a step back, and think about that, and think about how we use our time, think about how we make decisions, and then fast forward your life, that's powerful. And you're almost just like working backwards of like, okay, Sean wants to be in this space. Well, he's going to be lighting the fuse towards creating those moments and those memories with his kids and his grandkids so they can pass that on to their family. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that. And man, that's powerful. That's powerful. So I thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else that I have not hit on that you would like to share with the listeners that you feel is important?
Well, man, I think we hit on it, but I always conclude with this. This is a big problem. And I think it's bigger than most people realize. And it's going to shape our society for many, many years to come. We've got to figure out how to tackle it. And that's really what's motivating Canopy. That's why we're doing the work that we're doing, because I have a vision for how families can actually live well with technology. And so we're early in the journey, but we're very motivated to get there because I think this matters. And so I'm grateful to you today for giving me and Canopy a chance just to try to open some eyes to what we're dealing with, and then hopefully take a step in the direction of what we can do together. So thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. And Jeff, enjoy the show. And we didn't get a chance to talk about pizza today, but I'll hopefully on a future episode.
Yeah, no. I was trying to find the space, but then it's like, nah, which makes this fun for me. It just didn't lead to that. But yeah, I definitely would love to get you back on. And I want to throw out a couple other resources. Sean mentioned this one, but some websites I'm just going to list real quick, and I'll put them on the write-up for this. But fightthenewdrug.org, some really good resources on that. Some other ones, just Prevent Child Abuse America. They have some good information on understanding the effects of pornography on children. So Prevent Child Abuse America. And then Internet Matters. And then they have some good resources as well for protecting your child. And then obviously one of the best out there right now is Sean's company, Canopy.us. Again, that's CANOPY.us. My Pasho and I thank you for tuning in to another episode of Life's Essential Ingredients. We appreciate you listening in. Appreciate the work Sean and his team is doing. And we'll see everybody next week. Thanks for taking the time to listen in. And boom, that just happened.